Pastor Rod mentioned about yesterday's memorial funeral service for Lionel. So if you didn't know Lionel, there's his picture there and his dates and that. And talk a little bit about him this morning. I want to give you the opportunity to talk if anyone's got a story, because Lionel was the sort of guy that when you'd met him, you wouldn't forget him. He was larger than life in many ways and very influential as well. But he became a believer in Jesus later in life, him and his wife Pauline, and they did that through Sandra, their good friend Sandra, who's here this morning as well. But I just wanted to give people an opportunity who knew him. If you had a quick story, we're going to give you a microphone. Come up the front.
About 6 years ago, when me and my wife parted company, I was trying to get back with my wife, and I was talking to Lionel. And they usually had a ministry down at the coffee shop at the Freddie Fudpuckers. It's not a swear word, sorry. But anyway. Basically, they're pensioners. They don't own anything really, and they're basically broke. And I was broke at the time. And what happened was, Lionel looked at me and he says, "You want to go on that boat cruise with your family, don't you?" Because my wife decided to take all the kids and that on a boat cruise. And I said, "Yeah, I probably would, but I'm not in the very financial situation, mate." He said, "I've got $1,000, you can have it." And I looked at him, I said, "No, I can't take it. I can't, I won't do that." Anyway, eventually I got the money, but just that giving, that charitable heart that he had. And I know for a fact my wife used to go there to their, they used to run the, what was the name of the Hope Charity, is it, down here? They used to run Hope Charity, and he used to look after all the poor people. And he used to give them really good deals. I think they nearly sacked him because he was too generous in the end. So I'm just saying from my own experience, I take people on face value. So thanks very much. Anyway, see you. Good.
Thank you.
I just want to take you back to when I first arrived in this church. The first person I met was Pastor Rod, who met me at the old classrooms up here. The second person to meet was this gentleman here, Lionel. And I always remember his name because that's my father's name. Well, it's a very unusual name, Lionel. And the other thing I remember him for, he crushed my right hand. If anyone has ever shook his hand, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He's had that gorilla grip. And I spent a lot of time with Lionel and Pauline on the cruise with Chunna and Ruby. Everyone remember Chunna and Ruby? In that wooden boat? I don't know if you've been on that cruise. And this gentleman here was getting into the side of the boat. It was very rough that day. Our little boat was going up and down, probably 1.5 meters. Lionel went over the edge and slipped on the floor and broke 3 ribs. Pauline, believe it or not, I was a witness, and so was Janice. There she is, Janice. Pauline floated over the side, because the side of the boat's about this high, okay? It was very hard for Pauline to try and get off a rope over into the boat, and she floated over the top and landed in the middle of the boat next to Lionel, who was lying in a lot of pain on his chest. No one believed he'd broken 3 ribs, but I did, because I kept praying for him every day. And I had the opportunity to see Lionel about a couple of days before he passed away. Him and I had a real one-on-one. And he reminded me of that day where I prayed for him on the boat. There was only 2 people who believed he'd broken his ribs. Janice was one, and I was the other. So I'm really going to miss this guy. But he said to me, "Kevin, I'll see you soon." And I thought, well, I hope he meant that in a good way. I thought, maybe guys have got a number on me, And he was fair dinkum. And I said, "I don't know." Yeah, thanks, Rod. Yeah, he said, "I'll see you soon, Kevin." And I thought, well, I don't know if I can get back this week, Lionel, but I'll do my best. And he meant that he'll see me in heaven. He was so assured, folks, that he was going to see Jesus. Okay? That's how sure he was of his faith, that he said, "I will be with Jesus sometime this week." And sure enough, it happened, as Rod knows. And just, he's an awesome guy. Thank you, brother.
Right.
Lionel and Pauline did Alpha with us, and they just had such servant hearts. They were always there as the catering, and after the first one that they did, I think they did 3 or 4. It was amazing. I wanted to honour the memory of a man that just had such a servant heart. And I have to say, I used to cringe when I saw his letters to the editor in the paper. I didn't quite agree with those often, but he always had a strong opinion as well, and he really stood up for what he believed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to honour Lionel. He was part of our Christmas in the Park team for a few years, and he did really well. He was really connected. He was a person that was very connected with the community, and he had the gift of getting money from people. Like, that's the last thing I'd want to do, is ask somebody for money. But he really had a gift of that. He was connected in the community. He had a heart for what we were doing as a church, the vision of taking Christ's name into the community at Christmas in the Park. And he did really well, and that was when we were starting from scratch. You know, we got a basic budget of about $15,000 to put Christmas in the Park on, and yeah, that was when we needed to get the whole lot before we were blessed with some money from the council these days. But yeah, just like to honour him for that, and we really appreciated it. Mm-hmm.
Morning, everyone. Lionel was a really important person to me, and quite soon after we met, I started calling him Dad. It was just this thing, and always did it. And it wasn't until yesterday that I actually realised that Lionel was born the same year as my dad, and it just became more meaningful to me. My dad and I don't live near each other geographically, and Lionel just really filled that in my life. He gave me the dad hugs that I really needed, and he also, when I really needed a dad in my life to step up for me when we were going through something as a family, Lionel was there, and he had the understanding of that context that I really needed at the time. So some of you know that Lionel served in the Air Force here in Australia, and so Lionel had a understanding what that was like going in, and also being on the outside of that. So when our youngest daughter joined the Navy about 6 years ago, she didn't really have a very easy time of it. And Lionel was an absolute rock for me and Greg. Lionel talked Greg and I through it all the time. We could go to him and know that he understood where we were coming from. So again, in that way, he really filled that dad role for me, and always had the answer that I needed, and the comfort of that situation. So that was so important to us, that he had the understanding as someone who had served. So that was just absolutely massive in our life, and I really want to thank him for that. Yesterday was really awesome, so yeah, if you came and helped yesterday, thank you so much. It meant a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Carol was here at the beginning yesterday and at the end. So wonderful, wonderful work. That's great. Sandra, could you just stand up for a moment, please? That's all, just so people can see and know who you are. Okay. Thank you, Sandra. Okay, you can sit down again. All right. If you've got stories more at morning tea, will you share them? Share your stories with each other about Lionel. That'd be good. But Sandra is a sucker for a cute face, particularly dog faces. And one day, Lionel's wife, Pauline, was walking her dog past Sandra's house. Sandra saw the dog, went out, and then started up a conversation, ended up inviting Pauline to church. Pauline wasn't a Christian, I believe. And invited her to church, and Pauline started coming. Lionel would, Pauline didn't drive, so Lionel would then offer to drive Pauline to church, but he didn't want to come himself. So he would pull up outside the high school where we were meeting as a church, drop her off, and then he would come back at the end of the service to pick her up. And with Sandra as well. Because we're at the high school, we had some sandwich board signs pointing to where the church was meeting. And after a few weeks of dropping Pauline to church, Lionel started, at the end of the service, he just started bringing the sandwich boards in for us. It's something we'd have to do. And obviously, as we've heard in the stories, that's just natural for him to help. And the sandwich boards led to a couple of conversations with people in the church. And then I think he came to coffee once. And then, lo and behold, he started coming to church as well. And several months later, he was baptised. There was a photo in his tribute yesterday of Pastor Rod baptising him and Pauline. And like I said at the start, he became a believer later in life, and it was really through Sandra and her love of dogs. God can use anything. If you're willing and available, God will use you, who you are, and what you like, and what you can do to see others come to Him.